The first rule of interplanetary medicine was simple: never trust a patient who said they were fine. The second, more personal rule Dr. Elias Wren lived by was that fine was a black hole of a word, sucking all the meaning from a conversation until nothing useful remained. Sierra Vale, his current and most creatively stubborn patient, was a master of that emptiness. She sat perched on the edge of the bio-bed, her slender, four-fingered hands resting calmly in the lap of her simple woven tunic. Her skin, which for the Kolethi was a living canvas of emotion, held a placid, unreadable beige. Her large, dark eyes, beautifully shaped and entirely without sight, were fixed on a point somewhere over his left shoulder. From her temples, two fine, feathery feelers curved gracefully, twitching with movements so minute they were almost imperceptible as they tasted the air. "So," Elias said, his worn chair groaning as he swiveled. The medbay, a standard human prefab dropped onto the foundations of a bombed-out Qualethi forum, was a space of purposeful disassembly. On one counter, a decommissioned diagnostic tool lay in pieces, its guts exposed next to a soldering iron and a half-empty mug of cold coffee. His gaze fell on a scarred piece of metal, a fragment of a military-grade heatsink from his old life in the Corps of Engineers. The memory returned, sharp as ever. An atmospheric condenser on a desert outpost, engineered to perfection, that failed catastrophically because no one had considered the local children would find its humming warmth an excellent place to nap, blocking the intake vents. A technical success, a human-level failure. He'd carried that lesson for 23 years. He dragged his attention back to the present. "The sensory withdrawal markers are up again. Just a tick. Anything you want to talk about?" "I'm fine, Doctor," Sierra said. Her voice was a low, pleasant melody, but the words were a fortress wall. "Fine," Elias muttered, scrubbing a hand over his tired face. "That word should be classified as a biohazard. Your cortisol is elevated, your REM patterns look like a seismograph during an earthquake, and your skin's baseline pigmentation has been trending toward grayscale for 2 weeks. That's the Qualethi equivalent of a human teenager discovering existential poetry." A small, wry smile touched her lips. "Your metaphors are always so Terran." "I work with what I know. Come on, Sierra. Talk to me." Her feelers quivered, a faster, agitated rhythm that betrayed her placid expression. There's nothing to talk about. She was an exceptional liar, but he had learned to listen with more than his ears. He could feel a micro-tremor in her voice, a low hum like a motor strained, almost to stalling. It wasn't the thrill of a problem to be solved, but the grinding friction of a problem she believed was unsolvable. "You're doing it again," she said, her head tilting slightly. "Doing what?" "Vibrating," she said. "The floorboards are humming. You're stressed. Did you finally break the sonic sterilizer for good this time?" He shot a guilty glance at the device in question, which was, in fact, in 3 distinct pieces. "That is a separate incident involving a miscalibrated power cell and a moment of unwarranted optimism. We are talking about you." She let out a soft sigh, a sound of pure, unadulterated weariness that worried him more than any diagnostic. It was the sound of someone lowering their flag. "The checkup is over, Doctor. The results are what they are." She slid off the bed with a fluid, memorized grace. She knew the map of his chaotic medbay by heart. "Sierra," he started, but she was already at the door. "I appreciate the concern, Elias. Truly," she said, her voice softening. "But you can't fix this with a hypo spray or a repurposed comms dish." She stepped out into the harsh light of her settlement's sun. He watched her go, a slim, proud figure, navigating a world that refused to make room for her. The lesson of the failed condenser echoed in his mind. The machine had been perfect. The world it had to live in was the failure. Sierra's world was an absence of darkness, but a crushing presence of sound and sensation. Stepping from the medbay's sterile hum, She planted her bare feet on the packed earth of the main thoroughfare. The grit was a familiar language. Fine, loose powder. No rain in at least 3 days. To her left, the high tss of grubs sizzling on a hot plate, mingling with the scent of spices, and the vendor's rhythmic clatter. To her right, the deep thrum of the settlement's water purifier, Elias's handiwork, a constant heartbeat she could feel in her bones. Ahead, the noise began. The reason for the gray. The Sky-Strike courtyard. As she drew closer, the distant murmur resolved into a wall of sound that scraped at her nerves. The frantic thud-thump of feet on hard-packed clay, sharp grunts of effort, piercing shouts of triumph, and woven through it all, the pervasive, electric crackle of the floating energy hoops. The ball itself was silent, a ghost. The players tracked it with their eyes, a dizzying spectacle she could only imagine. For her, it was a sensory assault, an equation she could not solve, like trying to hear a single feather fall in a rock slide. A story her grandmother told surfaced, about matriarch Solon's mate, a Sky-Strike hero from before the war. He'd come back from the fighting with a tremor in his hands, his grace shattered. The colony had treated him with reverence and a polite, crushing silence. They'd looked past his disability so completely that they'd ended up looking past him. He had faded, they said, not from his injury, but from the quiet, courteous isolation. Syrah felt that same fading. She felt the vibrations of the game through her feet, a chaotic tremor that told her nothing of the ball's fight, only of the frantic energy of those who could see it. She was standing at the edge of the most important conversation of her generation, and she couldn't understand a word. Her feelers drooped. She knew her skin was leaching its color, turning that miserable, unhappy gray. The knot in her chest, the one Elias's machines labeled sensory withdrawal, tightened. He thought it was a medical condition. She knew it was the profound ache of being alone in a crowd. She turned to walk the long way around, but it was too late. "Why doesn't Syrah ever play?" It was Leary, a younger resident, her question innocent and loud. A harsh scoff answered, "She can't! She's blind, you pebble brain!" The voice was Draz's, sharp and dismissive. Syrah froze, her breath held tight. She waited for the one voice that mattered, the one that could have corrected him, softened the blow, said anything. Horan, the star player, whose movements were compared to a poet's verse, said nothing. His silence landed with physical weight, stealing the air from her lungs. Draz's cruelty hadn't wounded her. The quiet, pitying agreement from the one person everyone admired did. His silence was a judgment. It declared her not a person, but a condition. An unfortunate case. The knot in her chest stole her breath. Her skin felt cold. Without a word, she turned and walked away, the chaotic sounds of the game chasing her. Each cheer a fresh spike of exclusion. From his medbay window, Elias saw it all. He saw the question, the cruel answer, and the devastating silence. He watched Syrah's proud posture collapse, her feelers drooping like wilted flowers. He didn't need a biomonitor to see her spirit dim. His gaze lifted to the administrative spire overlooking the courtyard. On its balcony stood Matriarch Solon, her posture as rigid as the building itself. She was watching the game, her expression a mask of stern pride, her eyes fixed on Horan, the embodiment of tradition she so fiercely guarded. Elias saw in her face the same unwavering belief in perfection he'd once seen in his own superiors, an intolerance for flaws. And he knew, with a sinking feeling, the problem was woven into the very fabric of this place. His face hardened into a look of grim, unyielding resolve. He found her later, perched on the low stone wall at the edge of the settlement, overlooking the vast, dark ravine. She was tossing a small stone up and down, catching it with unerring precision. The soft thump of it in her palm was a tiny, lonely rhythm in the quiet evening. He approached slowly, making enough sound with his boots on the gravel to not startle her. He stopped a few feet away. "Did you follow me, Doctor?" she asked quietly, not turning.
"My sonic sterilizer remains stubbornly in 3 pieces," he said, his voice a low rumble as he sat beside her. "I figured a change of scenery might help me remember where the primary energy coil goes."
"It goes inside the containment housing," she said, without missing a beat. "You always forget to engage the dampening field first."
He let out a short, rough chuckle. "Right. See? You're my external memory."
She didn't smile. The stone continued its steady cadence. Toss, catch, thump.
"I saw you near the courtyard earlier," he said gently.
The rhythm broke. She fumbled the catch, the stone clattering onto the path. Her hands rested in her lap, unnaturally still. "It's a loud game," she said, her voice a carefully constructed wall. "I was just passing by."
"Sierra."
He said her name, nothing more. "It doesn't matter."
"It looks like it does."
She turned to face him then, and her dark, unseeing eyes seemed to bore through him. The faint gray undertone of her skin was visible in the twilight. Her feelers were tucked back hard against her temples, in a gesture of pure defense. "And what if it does matter?" Her voice fractured with a raw, desperate frustration. "What are you going to do about it? Resequence my genome? Grow me new eyes in a vat? You're a doctor, Elias. A mechanic. You fix things that are broken. I am not a broken machine."
"I never said you were," he said softly.
The fire went out of her, doused by a profound wave of exhaustion. It was the weariness of fighting the same unwinnable battle every single day. She slumped, turning away to face the vast, dark emptiness of the ravine. Her shoulders, usually held so straight, curved inward. Her voice, when she spoke, was stripped of all melody, all fire. It was flat, formal. The voice of someone reciting a verdict long ago accepted. "Sorry, sir," she said to the empty air. "I can't play ball." The "sir" hit him harder than her anger. It was a slammed door. He wasn't Elias anymore. He was just another authority figure. He understood. She wasn't broken. The world she'd been given was. The game was. And Elias Wren was very, very good at fixing broken things. That night, the medbay transformed. Elias Wren, the tinkerer, was in his element. Wires snaked across the floor. A holographic schematic of a sky-strike ball floated in the air, which he littered with annotations from a light pen.
"Okay, Wren, talk it out,"
he muttered to the empty room.
"The problem is the ball's silence. The problem is the world's noise. Signal-to-noise ratio from hell."
He paced, gesturing at the hologram.
"The players are the noise. The hoops are noise. The ground is noise. The ball is the signal. A whisper in the hurricane."
He stopped, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face.
"So, you don't try to hear the whisper better."
He spun around, eyes alight.
"You give the whisper a megaphone."
He dove for a crate, yanking out a decommissioned sonic imager. He liberated its heart, a variable frequency sonic emitter. Next, a kinetic charger from a derelict emergency beacon. It generated power from movement. He began to solder, his hands steady. The memory of the failed condenser wasn't a weight anymore. It was fuel. This time, the solution wouldn't just be elegant. It would be human. Or, well, Calethi.
"Charger powers the emitter,"
he mumbled, his tongue poking out in concentration.
"Faster the ball moves, more power it generates. More power, higher amplitude, louder, yes. And Doppler shift. The pitch changes relative to the listener. It tells you if it's coming or going."
He cobbled the pieces together inside the hollowed-out casing of a diagnostic probe, a Frankenstein's monster of tech. It was ugly, heavy, but it had potential. He held the finished prototype in his palm, roughly the size of a sky strike ball, but 5 times the weight. With a flick of a switch, it came to life, emitting a low, monotonous, and deeply irritating buzz. He grinned. It was a Hail Mary pass into the end zone of physics and hope, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was working on the right problem. "It's an annoying rock," Sierra declared, her nose wrinkled in distaste. Elias fought to hide his disappointment. They stood in a secluded patch of grass behind the medbay. He'd just tossed the prototype, his first echo ball, and a gentle arc. It had buzzed the whole way, a single, grating, monotonous B-flat. "But you tracked it?" he said, a little too hopefully. "I knew where the giant angry hornet was," she corrected. "It didn't tell me anything useful. Was it moving fast, slow, spinning? The sound never changed." She crossed her arms, her feelers forming a V-shape of disapproval. "A sound has to tell a story, Doctor. Speed, arc, spin. This just shouts its own name. It's the drazz of sports equipment." Elias winced. The comparison was brutal and accurate. The prototype was a failure. He looked at the heavy ball, then at her. The lesson of the condenser returned. He hadn't accounted for the user. He bent down, picking up the heavy ball, his mind racing. "Okay," he said, his tone shifting from dejection to sudden energy. "You're right. That was the point." Her posture eased slightly. "The point was to create an annoying rock?" "This is a diagnostic tool," he reframed instantly. "My ears are shot. Yours are the only instrument on this dust ball sensitive enough to tell me what's wrong. Its failure is the data I needed. Your feedback is the data." She was silent for a long moment, her head tilted as she processed his words, sensing the shift from being a subject of an experiment to being its lead calibrator. "Fine," she said finally, a ghost of her wry smile returning. "If you want my help, the story needs a bigger vocabulary than just buzz." Days of frantic, coffee-fueled nights followed. He incorporated her feedback, treating her insights as design specs. He rebuilt the prototype from scratch, using 3 micro-emitters linked to a far more sensitive kinetic charger and a tiny gyroscope from a defunct survey drone. He found her in the settlement library, her fingers tracing the raised script of a Kalethi text scroll. "Phase 2 is ready for calibration," he announced. She looked up, a genuine smile playing on her lips. "Is this one less of an annoying rock?" "Vastly, but I need your help tuning the frequencies." "Seriously, my hearing tops out at a frequency a Grok's bat would find laughably low. Yours is precise." He handed her the new ball. It was lighter, smoother, and silent. He was careful to frame his request as a scientific necessity, an appeal to her expertise, not her blindness. She weighed the ball in her hand. "You need me to help you tune your noisy toy," she translated, her tone dry, but lacking its previous bite. "Exactly." "Fine," she said, rolling up the scroll. "But if this one gives me a headache, you owe me 2 of your secret stash of Terran chocolate bars." "Deal," he said, without hesitation. They stood in the same grassy patch, the air charged with anticipation. Elias took the ball, his heart thumping. "Ready?" he asked. Sierra nodded, her body poised, head tilted at that familiar, attentive angle. He tossed it, a high, gentle arc. The moment the ball left his hand, it came alive with a clear, melodic chime that rose in pitch as it climbed, then deepened as it fell. Woven into that tone was a subtle, rhythmic clicking. Tick, 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 that sped up and slowed down, a perfect auditory representation of its spin. It was a story told in a sound. Sierra's head tracked the ball's movement perfectly. The ball descended, its musical hum lowering, the spin kick slowing. It was heading right for her. Elias held his breath. She reached out a hand in a movement of fluid, graceful certainty. Her fingers closed around the ball at the precise apex of its final, low bounce. The moment her skin made contact, the ball emitted a single, triumphant, piercingly clear C major chord. For a heartbeat, there was silence. And then, a sound Elias had never heard from her. A laugh. Genuine, unrestrained. A bubbling cascade of pure, unadulterated joy. And her skin. A wave of vibrant cyan flooded outward from her chest, replacing the dull gray that had clung to her for weeks. It was like watching a black and white photo bloom into life. He couldn't stop the wide, foolish grin that spread across his face. It had actually worked. He threw it again, harder. The ball sang a faster, higher-pitched song. She caught it. Again, she caught it. She threw it back, her aim guided by the memory of its position. He caught it. They were playing. The strange, musical notes drifting from behind the medbay were an anomaly. Distracting. "What is that racket?" Horan's voice, sharp with annoyance, cut through their game. He stood at the edge of the grass, flanked by Draz and another acolyte, their Sky Strike practice clearly interrupted. "It's distracting us," Draz grumbled, scowling at the echo ball in Sierra's hand. "The entire point of Sky Strike is purity," Horan declared, his voice full of the arrogance of the gifted. "Tracking by sight alone. Sound is a crutch. For the slow." The vibrant cyan of Sierra's skin instantly dimmed. The joy on her face faltered. She clutched the ball to her chest. Elias saw the light go out of her, and a cold, protective anger flared. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Sierra and the newcomers. "You're right," Elias said, his voice dangerously calm. "It's not Sky Strike. It's harder." Horan let out a derisive laugh. "Harder? It's a noisemaker for a—" He trailed off, glancing at Sierra, but the insult remained, sharpening the space between them. "For a blind person." "Is it?" Elias challenged, his eyes narrowed. "Here's a thought. Try catching it. With your eyes closed." Horan's pride warred with his condescension. The challenge was absurd, but it was also a direct slight to his legendary reflexes. "Fine!" Horan snapped, his skin flushing an irritated red. He tossed his baton to Draz and stepped forward. "Throw your stupid toy." He squeezed his eyes shut in a theatrical gesture of contempt. Elias gave Sierra a subtle, encouraging pat. Her expression was hesitant, but then a spark of her old fire returned. She took a deep breath, and with a smooth, powerful motion, she threw the echo ball. The ball sang its complex song. To Horan, it was just noise. His brain, so finely tuned to visual processing, couldn't make any sense of the auditory chaos. He lunged to his left, hands outstretched, grasping at empty air. The ball sailed past his side and landed with a soft, melodic thump on the grass. Draz and the other young man howled with laughter. Horan's eyes flew open. His skin shifted to a mottled crimson. He glared at the ball, then at Sierra, his jaw tight with humiliation. "It's a stupid human game," he spat, snatching his baton back from Draz. He stalked away without another word, his friend scrambling to follow. Sierra stood there, the miserable gray gone from her skin, replaced by a complex, thoughtful lavender. She had won. Word of Horan's failure spread, but the story shifted from his humiliation to the mysterious musical ball. The next afternoon, a small, hesitant delegation appeared at the edge of the field. It was 3 of the other young residents, including a quiet one with large, observant eyes. It was Lyran, Matriarch Solon's grandson. Can we try?" Lyran asked. Sierra glanced at Elias, who gave her a warm, encouraging smile. This was her game now. "Of course," she said, her voice soft. The hour that followed was one of pure play. There were fumbles and misses, but they were met with laughter, not scorn. Sierra was a patient teacher, explaining how to listen for the pitch, how to read the spin. Lyran's face was alight with excitement. The small grassy patch filled with the melody of the echo ball, and the bright sounds of joyful shouts. A few days later, the game had evolved. It was more chaotic, with more players. After a clumsy pileup, Sierra found Elias. "There's a problem," she said. "I thought it was going pretty well," he replied. "The ball tells me where it is," she explained. "But in a real game, I need to know where Lyran is. The ball is only one part of the story." Elias got a familiar look in his eye. "You're right. The players are still noise." He tapped his chin. "Give me a day. I think I can make your whole team sing too." From the edge of the main Skystrike courtyard, Horan watched them. He saw the way Sierra moved with confidence, the way Lyran, who couldn't hit a Skystrike ball, was catching the musical ball. The pity he once felt for Sierra had curdled into a mixture of frustration, envy, and a grudging, infuriating respect. Later, Elias saw him from the medbay window. Horan was alone, far from the polished Skystrike court, tossing a plain rock into the air. Over and over, he closed his eyes, tilted his head, and just listened. His face was a mask of intense, frustrated concentration, trying to translate the simple whoosh and thud into the complex language he'd heard. The game, which the participants had started calling Echoes, flourished. It became the sanctuary for the uncoordinated, the slow, the quiet ones. Their joyful, musical games began to spill over into the edges of the main courtyard, a vibrant symphony that stood in stark contrast to the silent focus of the Skystrike players. This drew attention. From her balcony, Matriarch Solon watched the new game encroach upon the old, her expression like carved stone. She saw not play, but a contagion. It was loud, disorderly, and a threat to the sanctity of their most cherished tradition. The memory of her mate, fading in a world that had no place for his imperfection, was a constant, painful whisper. Her rigid adherence to tradition was her shield against that pain. The official edict came the next day. The game of Echoes was forbidden from the main courtyard. It was, the notice read, a disruption to the discipline and focus required for proper Skystrike training. The players, led by a quietly confident Sierra, were officially exiled. But Solon's decree had an unintended effect. It didn't kill the game. It gave it an identity. It made it a rebellion. Horan's Skystrike game was falling apart. "Your head isn't in the game," his father said after a humiliating practice, his voice thick with disappointment. He was distracted. The memory of his failure, the song of the Echo Ball, Sierra's effortless grace. It was a splinter in his mind. He had mastered the physical world, but here was a sensory world he was blind to. He needed to conquer it, to prove to his father and himself that he could master this new skill. He found Sierra and her team in their dusty, outlawed playing field. He strode into their midst, and the game faltered, then stopped. The others fell silent, looking from him to Sierra. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, visible frustration. He looked directly at Sierra. "How?" he asked, the single word an admission of his own inadequacy. "How do you do it? I've been trying. It's just noise. I can't hear it." Sierra was silent for a moment, her head tilted as she read the desperate frustration in his voice. "That's your problem," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "You're trying to hear. The sound is just a tool. You have to stop trying to hear it and start listening to what it's telling you." Horan stared at her, the words sinking in. A flicker of understanding crossed his face, followed by a new resolve. "Listening," he repeated softly. "I can't learn that by standing here." He looked at her team, then back to her, his competitive fire rekindling with a new purpose. "There's only one way. A real game, with stakes." He stood taller, his voice regaining its force. "I challenge you. My team, the best of the Skystrike players, against yours. Here. Tomorrow. If we win, you stop the noisy nonsense for good. If you win..." He grit his teeth, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "You get the right to play in the main courtyard. Whenever you want." A collective gasp went through Sierra's team. The main courtyard. Hollowed ground. The stakes were impossibly high. Sierra met his gaze, understanding now. This wasn't just a threat. It was a desperate, prideful plea for a lesson he could only learn in the crucible of competition. She raised her voice for all to hear. A queen accepting a challenge in her own court. "We accept." News of the challenge was a shockwave. Tradition versus innovation. The athletes versus the outcasts. By the time the two teams faced each other the next day in the dusty, unsanctioned field, a crowd had gathered. And on the edge of the crowd, posture rigid, stood matriarch Solon. She had come to see this foolishness put to rest. But as her grandson, Lyron, took his position on Sierra's team, she saw not fear, but a focused, joyful excitement. He belonged here. Elias stood near the matriarch, a respectful distance away. He didn't try to persuade her. He simply began to commentate, his voice low, as if to himself. "See how Sierra's team is spread out?" he murmured. "They don't need to keep their eyes on each other. They're listening for space, reading the field with sound." Solon didn't reply, but her feathery feelers twitched. The game began. Horan's team was a blur of athleticism, but they were playing a visual game in an auditory world, colliding with each other as they yelled for passes lost in the ball's song. Sierra's team was a network. The quiet clicks from their emitters created a three-dimensional map of the field only they could read. Sierra was the hub. She didn't move with Horan's explosive speed, but with unerring purpose, directing her players, anticipating plays based on the symphony of sounds she could comprehend better than anyone. Solon found herself watching Sierra. The young woman commanded her team not with dominance, but with a deep understanding of her environment. Solon saw strategy, communication, a quiet authority. She saw a different kind of leadership, a commander in the field. The score was neck and neck, the intensity racketing up. The crowd was mesmerized. The game reached its tipping point. The score was tied, with only moments left. Horan had the ball, driving hard. Two of Sierra's players converged on him, a pincer movement of clicking emitters. He was trapped. Panic flared, but Sierra's advice echoed. "Stop trying to hear. Start listening." He closed his eyes, blocking the visual chaos. He listened. He heard the defenders closing in, their footfalls, and beyond them, an open pocket of sound. His teammate Draz had broken free near the goal. It was a clean auditory path. "Draz, now!" Horan yelled, and with a surge of adrenaline he threw. He didn't aim with his eyes. He threw to the sound. A perfect, soaring pass guided by his newfound sense. It was the best play of his life. But Sierra wasn't playing his game. She wasn't just listening to the players. She was listening to the shape of the game itself. She had heard Draz break free, had anticipated Horan's desperate, novice-level listening. He would throw to the first and most obvious opening. So she hadn't moved to cover Draz or Horan. She had moved to cover the space between them, the inevitable path the ball would take. From Horan's perspective, she materialized from nowhere. The ball sang its perfect descending scale, heading straight for Draz's waiting hands, but Sierra was already there. She leaped, her body uncoiling in a move of pure athletic grace, and intercepted the pass mid-fight. With a fluid twist, she swung her arm, batting the singing ball squarely through the makeshift goal. The triumphant C major chime echoed across the silent field. A moment of stunned silence, and then Sierra's team, the crowd, everyone, erupted. Lyron tackled Sierra in a hug, his face beaming with a joy so pure it was dazzling. Horan stood, breathing hard, watching the celebration. The crimson of exertion on his skin was slowly replaced by a deep, respectful blue. He had made a perfect play. and been perfectly outthought. He walked across the field to Syrah and offered the formal Qualethi shoulder clasp, a gesture of respect between equals. "You were right," he said, his voice quiet with hard-won humility. "It's about listening." Matriarch Solan watched it all. She saw the clasp of respect, the humility in Horan, but most of all, she saw her grandson, Lyran, celebrating as a champion, his face alight with a confidence she had never seen. He wasn't on the sidelines. He was at the very center of the joy. The shield she had built around her heart crumbled into dust. Solan descended and walked onto the field. The cheering died down. She stopped before Syrah, Horan, and Lyran. "A tradition," Solan began, her voice laced with a new, softer tone, "is not the rules of the game. It is the strength it builds in our people." She looked from Horan's athletic power to Syrah's strategic command. "Sky Strike builds one kind of strength. The strength of the swift, the sharp-eyed." She paused, her gaze settling on Syrah with profound respect. "This game, Echoes, it builds a different kind of strength. The strength of the listener, the strength of the team that moves as one. A strength we have been deaf to for far too long." She turned to the crowd. "From this day forward, Echoes is an official sport of this settlement. It will be given the same resources, respect, and hallowed ground as Sky Strike." She looked back at Syrah, a small, unprecedented smile on her lips. "A culture must be a living thing, child, or it is just a museum of memories. Thank you for reminding us how to create something new." That night, Elias found Syrah on the low wall by the ravine, holding the game-winning echo ball. "You've been busy," he said, sitting beside her. She smiled, her skin a peaceful silver blue. "We have our first official practice tomorrow, in the main courtyard. Horan is surprisingly bad at it," she said with a laugh. "But he's a very good student." They sat in comfortable silence. "I never asked to be included," she said quietly. "I never asked for help. I thought the only way was for me to change." "It's a classic engineering mistake," Elias replied, looking at the stars. "A stupid one. You see a part that doesn't fit, so you try to force it. Took me a long time to learn that sometimes you don't change the part. You redesign the whole damn machine around it." She laughed softly and leaned her shoulder against his. Together, they watched the stars she couldn't see, feeling the warmth of a quiet revolution, one not with weapons, but with wires and sound, and a willingness to finally, truly listen. Weeks later, the medbay doors opened and Syrah walked in, her steps sure and confident. The familiar scent of hot flux told her Elias was in his workshop. "Elias, I need an engineer," she said, her voice clear and purposeful. He looked up from a schematic, surprised. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Something needs to be made right," she said. "I was talking with old Manel, the weaver. His feelers were damaged by reactor sickness. He's lost the fine touch. He can't feel the tension of the threads anymore. He thinks his life's work is over." She stopped at his workbench. "He can still move his hands, he just can't feel. I have an idea. A glove, maybe? Something that can read the thread tension and turn it into a language he can understand. But I don't know engineering. I know the language." Elias stared at her, a slow, wondrous grin spreading across his face. He looked down at his own failed schematic on the datapad, a clumsy, over-engineered haptic glove for that very same problem. He'd been trying to make it vibrate, thinking about signal strength. She had been thinking about language. "You're right," he said, his voice full of a new respect. He slid his failed designs off the datapad, clearing the screen. I keep forgetting the most important lesson. He pushed the datapad across the workbench to her. Show me, he said. Partner. Sierra pulled up a stool, her skin glowing with the bright cyan of inspiration. She was no longer a patient, no longer a problem to be solved. She was an innovator, a leader, a finder of solutions. Together, under the flickering light of the workshop, with her vision and his skill, they began to redesign the world.